On a list of RE4's most depressing locations, you'll commonly see the hospital, the prison, or the well. However, one small stop on the road to the lake has remained a lasting example of RE4 at its most dark, at its most discomforting. The graveyard and the church, a perfect place for an unsolved mystery, I'm sure. Just look at all these gravestones. There's even a small hole by the entrance. Was that dog sniffing around here at one point? He helps us with El Gigante later on, so he must have travelled through here. Among these aged stones and piles of debris, there's a few that stand out, showcasing the church's famous insignia in a time predating modern Los Luminados. Most are completely intelligible through years of age and degradation, but then there's these. The three twin sites are to describe the required pattern layout for the puzzle behind the church, but the twins themselves are completely neglected. Did they even exist? What year did they die? What's their names? Upon researching this mystery further, realizing that it has never been previously discussed by anyone, I have found the answers to all of these questions, and to date, the scariest things I've ever found on the channel so far. Although mostly gibberish, examining the writing at the top of the grave gives us two names, and with it an immediate breakthrough in the investigation and a vague understanding of their background. The names are Sarah and Emptabeth. Just to clarify, it does not say Elizabeth, there's no Z or L, it's clearly Emptabeth, a name which doesn't exist in any language. I went down a rabbit hole trying to find any information regarding this name. When I googled this in quotation marks, it brought me to this "I never swear on the channel but scary as fuck" newspaper article from 1987. I was almost shaking reading this for the first time. Nothing particularly important. It figures there's a dog at the bottom left of the page, but that's about it. I found out that EM is a unit of measurement for print, in this case an oddly specific newspaper from North Carolina in the 1980s. As a last resort, I cross-referenced North Carolina with just Tabeth instead, which is a real name, and it led me to a women's tennis club, about as far removed as we can possibly be at this point, but still funny nonetheless. So obviously Emptabeth doesn't exist, and the girl's name was just Elizabeth all along. I struggled with a date for a while, a potential timeline from when these girls died. First I resorted to examining the end credits for clues, and maybe these girls were members of the village before they succumbed to the parasite. As we know, none of the children survived the early stages of Las Plagas infection, that's why they aren't seen in the game. Assuming that they were children, the girls on slide 4 and 5 could have been Sarah and Elizabeth. Maybe this graveyard was created as their final resting place. It would be convenient, however, the age of these stones tell a much different story. Eventually I found a date that lined up perfectly. It was actually in plain sight all along. The date 1521 is written on the memorial, meaning these girls were alive at the same time as the first Castellan, Gregorio Salazar. The 16th century marked the temporary end of Los Luminados, the abolishment of pagan influence in the region, and the burial of its history. Because these girls are buried by the church, and not, let's say, impaled to a wall or decomposing in a wheelbarrow for instance, they rest beside obvious cult leaders involved in these ancient branches of Los Luminados, people that Sadler respect in death. I think it's possible that they were associated with Las Plagas. If that's the case, then these twins weren't children, they were basically the 16th century Bella sisters, but instead of chainsaws they had spears. Searching through the graveyard will only get us so far. Let's try the church. On the surface, the interior has little evidence. On a side note, I've always loved how quiet and relaxing this small church is, especially at night, almost preparing us for the stress of dealing with Ashley for the first time. By checking the altar, Leon questions the religion's cultural significance for the first time, but there's nothing in relation to the twins. That's until we look very closely at the stained glass on the top floor. We can make out a faint depiction of two girls on the bottom left. I can't really make out anything else, so let me know if you see anything. This glass dates from the late medieval period, where RE4 takes a lot of its inspiration from, especially the design of the castle. The Gothic era dates from the 14th to the 16th century. This proves that the time period of the glass matches up with the twins' deaths. Because of their importance, evident by the gravestones, I think these girls on the glass are in fact Sarah and Elizabeth. It may not be conclusive, but I think it's the closest that we're going to get. So, we know the names of the twins, what time period they're from, and we may even know what they may have looked like. But there's still many more questions I have. For instance, what's with this hole in the ground? It could have been the dog, I guess, but how is he able to smash its corresponding stone to bits? I believe that this was an attempted grave robbery. Let me explain. By taking one glance at any random stone, you'll quickly notice that all of them have the same writing on them. They all say Sarah and Elizabeth. The reason for this is obvious. The puzzle is another clear memorial to the twins because of the date on it. The glass on the church, again a dedicated illustration for the twins. This isn't a graveyard. The only bodies buried here are the twins. The quantity of stones are just red herrings, decoys to prevent a robbery. It's the only theory that explains why the writing is the same. Those that are slightly different are just reversed. It's the only theory that explains the amount of damage done to these stones. It's possible that the weather could have knocked them down, but some have definitely been disgraced intentionally. Grave desecration involves intentional acts of vandalism, theft, or the violation of land of the deceased. Whether it was for the purpose of stealing jewellery, kidnapping the bodies to blackmail Sadler, or out of anger, someone expressed a disinterest in Sarah and Elizabeth's grave in the past. It could have been someone in history, but it probably could have been in the time of the rebellion where much of the village population either tried to escape, rejected the parasite or the order of Salazar, subsequently Sadler and Mendez also. My conclusion, these young women were powerful pagan witches of the 16th century, admired immensely by Los Luminados during this dark time. They were soon to be banished from society and hunted on a large scale. Many of these people died under Gregorio and the Spanish Holy Inquisition. They were originally buried behind the church, where a puzzle monument stands in their memory today. After multiple attempts to dig up their bodies or disrespect their resting place, they were relocated to the right-hand side of the church's entrance in 1527. Many replicas were created over the years to ensure the safety of these girls, and eventually a cage was set up around the real gravesite, so they could finally rest undisturbed. Los Luminados may be a deranged group of people, but in death these girls only wanted peace, and I'm glad that Sadler could uphold that.
Believe it or not, it takes quite a lot of money to keep this church up and running.
What a nice little mystery. I want to thank everyone for voting on my last poll. I was kind of hoping that this one would win, that's why I put it number 1. And I always follow through on second place as well, but I'll tackle that in my own time. The church, especially at night, is one of those chill areas that make you feel so immersed, and I just love it. The atmosphere here is second to none. From the secret passage under the village all the way to the lake and back when it's raining, it's probably my favourite stretch of the game, honestly.